Hi, my name is Todd Rhodes, and I'm with Leadership Network, and I want to thank you for joining us for this special preview of the 2015 Nines. We wanted to give you just a short glimpse into what you can expect at this year's Nines. First of all, this year's theme we're really excited about. The theme is Engaging Millennials, Religious Nuns, and the Next Generation. And what we're finding in talking with literally hundreds and thousands of churches all across the country is that this is a topic that many church leaders are really starting to have. How do we reach millennials? How do we reach the religious nuns and those that are saying that they're done with the church? And how do we reach the children of millennials, the Generation Z, the next generation? We're going to look at all of these topics on this year's Nines. I want to give you just a few dates here. If you would write those down, make sure that you're all set to go. The Nines this year is on December 10th and 11th. That's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And it starts at noon Eastern and goes until 4 p.m. each day. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this later, so you want to stay tuned. We're going to do a very special evening session on Tuesday evening, December 10th. That's going to be not just for you and your staff, but also for your entire church to really kind of dive into this topic of millennials and engaging millennials and nuns and the next generation. We've asked a couple hundred lead pastors, college pastors, youth pastors, and children's pastors really to share what they're learning, what's working, what's not working in the area of engaging these different age groups and these different people segments. And they're going to share during this year's Nines exactly what they're learning. I don't think anybody really has everything figured out, which is a great learning opportunity for us as we learn together. Some of you might be saying, what in the world is the Nines? I mean, why do you call it the Nines? Well, let me give you just a brief backstory, and then we're going to get right into some great preview content from this year's event. The Nines was actually started back in 2009. It actually started on 09/09/09, September 9th, 2009. So you kind of see the Nines thing going there. We invited 99 speakers, more nines, to speak for 9 minutes each. And the response was so great, this was back in 2009, that we just kept the name. The name kind of stuck. So what you're going to find over these 2 days are about 100 speakers actually that will be speaking to us, sharing all of them usually about, we've lowered it, it's not 9 minutes anymore, it's usually about 5 minutes, short form content, so it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. You get to hear from a lot of different individuals, a lot of great leaders, a lot of great speakers, and again, it's all coming up this year on the Nines. We're going to get right into some preliminary content. Let me give you a little insight into what we're going to see today. We held, just a few weeks ago, in Seattle, Washington, at Gold Creek Community Church, kind of a convocation, kind of a gathering of some larger church lead pastors, and we brought in some speakers and some experts in this area of millennials and nuns and duns and the next generation, and we had them talk to us, giving us a little bit of background about each age group. This first age group that we're going to look at is the millennials, and those are, for our purposes for the Nines this year, we're looking at people that were born between 1981 and 1997. So anywhere from about 18 to 34 years old. And what we really want to do in the section of the Nines this year pertaining to engaging millennials is really kind of gain ideas and understand what it's going to take to reach this next generation, to engage this next generation, and give you ideas as to how you can do this in your own local church, your own local ministry context. One of the first speakers that we had at our day in Seattle that we want to invite you in and watch is a man named Hayden Shaw. And Hayden actually works, has about 20 years of experience in studying generational differences. He heads up Franklin Covey's work on generations, very knowledgeable, and Hayden actually has a new book coming out that's dropping this fall. It's called Sticking Points: How to Get 4 Generations Working Together in 12 Places That They Come Apart. fascinating insight into the millennial generation. I want you to watch this from Hayden Shaw.
We've never had 4 generations in the workplace, 5 generations of people we serve or constituencies before. Why is that? Why we never had 4 or 5 before? Because we died. There's been more increase in the human lifespan in the last 100 years than there were in the entire time human beings have been on the planet. 2/3 of the increase has happened in the last 100 years. Anybody know what the average age of mortality was in 1900? It was 48. Would you look around this room and just take a moment and identify the people who, statistically speaking, are glad they were born in this time and not in a previous, right? It gives whole new meaning to, I see dead people, right? Whole new meaning. Now, here's the challenge we have in churches. For the first time in history, we live this much longer. God has given us the greatest gift, I think, of our generation, our lifetime, is that we live another 30 years, but as a result, churches don't change for another 30 years. They would have changed organically, and now we have to change intentionally, or in order to keep one generation, the younger generation falls out the pipe like marbles, and to reach a generation, the very things that we've been talking about today, to reach a generation, also make older generations go find other churches that feel more like home. So what do we do? Well, let me give you 5 things that we're going to have to do differently. Very practical things you can do in the next 2 weeks and over the next year. There's nothing here that you can't do in the next year. The first one is to understand emerging adulthood. The millennials' identities, they come with some assembly required. Emerging adulthood is this new life stage. How many people have heard of it? Emerging adulthood? Gotcha. You know, when I ask groups of 100 people, maybe one hand goes up. How many of you have heard of adolescence? How many of you would find yourselves frustrated with a parent who is screaming at their child for getting pimples and being moody if they were 14? Emerging adulthood is a newly identified life stage that the boomers first went through, the Xers followed, and now the millennials go through it for longer periods of time. And as a result, we're now seeing it in a clearer relief. I'm going to speak to the leaders of the Department of Defense on Thursday night, and the thing I'm going to tell them is you need to pay attention to emerging adulthood. Somebody on your staff needs to be an expert in emerging adulthood, because when 70% of your workforce are 20-somethings, millennials, you've got an emerging adulthood issue as much as you have a millennial issue. I'm writing an article now for Huffington Post that basically says half the things we make as criticisms of millennials are actually characteristics of this new life stage. And just as we'd be frustrated with somebody who yells at an adolescent for doing things that have been identified as normal characteristics, so today, like in 1890 when the word adolescence was coined, a new life stage comes along, and we need to understand it so we can sort out the difference between what all generations will go through and what is unique to this generation. Number 2, we need to fight be good, feel good, and live your life. God is watching. We need to fight it because it is the enemy. We have seen the enemy, and there it is. Now, Christian Smith first discovered it. He calls it moralistic therapeutic deism, if you've heard of his research before. My sister-in-law said to me, you're going to write a popular book for Tyndale Publishing. You need to have a different name for it. So I just translated it into be good, feel good, live your life. Real quickly, be good. What Christian Smith discovered in interviewing all of these young people and watching it longitudinally is that they use psychological categories or words instead of theological words to describe things. Psychology has taken over. So in the story you heard earlier about somebody doing that devotional moment and saying, hey, it's not hard to give your heart to Christ. Other people at school have done it. Basically what they were explaining is, be good, feel good, live your life. It's the single greatest enemy that we face for the next 30 years, I believe. My conclusion in the research is that's what we're up against. Now, it's easy to have something to be up against because how many of you find when you try to teach theology, sometimes people are like, oh, but where's the practical? You ever watch people nod, those of you who are teachers? You ever watch people nod out? But when you can quote research that says, now this is what people believe, but you know what the Bible actually says? That research allows us to talk deeper about theology and yet speak to people who clue in to research. Be good, feel good, live our life. And this research gives us great opportunity to teach theology by having a boogeyman in order to teach it against. We have a foe, we have an enemy, and it's a nasty one. Be good. Good people will go to heaven. God loves good people. Feel good. God wants you to be happy. He's like Oprah in the sky. He wants you to be happy. It's about happiness. And the Bible is full of instruction to make you happier than you are. And then lastly, live your life. God isn't really involved in the day in and day out. He's background. He's wallpaper. He's there. When you need him, he'll jump right in and help you. But then he just lets you live your life. Now here's the scariest thing in Christian Smith's research, then we'll move on. Scariest thing is whether they came from conservative churches or liberal churches or the Catholic Church, there was very little statistical difference in what they believed and the terms they used to explain it. Only about 20% of the young people from very conservative churches used theological terms to explain what a Christian theology. It is the enemy, and you may not be able to do it by next week, but you can certainly get very familiar with it and take it on over the next year. And then connect them to older friends. We don't know what to do with 20-somethings. Even people who are leading 20-something ministries say, we're just figuring it out as we go. But you know, the one thing we do know is that if they have an adult friend who they can ask questions with, who they can talk openly about their doubts, who they can say, you seem to have it all together, I don't. Well, no, I don't have it all together, and here's what I struggled with, and here's what I struggled with when I was your age, and here's what I'm struggling with now. The 71% that Ed Stetzer discovered drop out of church between 18 and 23 for at least a year. 2/3 of them come back eventually, but at least for a year. We could cut that in half if we just took youth ministry and made student ministry go through 23 rather than 18. Why does student ministry end at 18 in most of our churches? The educational system does it that way. Statistically speaking, people are going to hell because of it. What if we took sponsors and rolled them over and their job was to text? You only have to have 2 or 3 sponsors in a large church roll over and text. It doesn't take a lot of contact to keep people, to double the chances that people stay in the church, in the faith, while they work through the tumultuous 20s, emerging adulthood. That's something we could do immediately that'd make a big impact. All right, let's move forward. Teach deeper and don't skip the hard questions. All right. 1 in 4 millennials who leave the church say the Bible's not taught often and clearly enough. Barna released in their latest book. 1 out of how many? 1 out of 4 millennials who left said the Bible isn't taught enough. Now, in the Bible college seminary that I went to, they were trying to address this need and hired a group to come in and help them design curriculum for people with doubts. And they brought a bunch of ministers and Christian churches of Christ, my denomination, together, and they said, hey, we want to launch this. And they said, well, this is good, this is all good, but you know, really what millennials want is authenticity and a way to get involved and making a difference. These intellectual questions, they're really not as big of their concern. You know, in Barna's latest book, of the 6 reasons millennials leave the church, 4 of them were intellectual. 4 of the 6 were intellectual. Now here's the thing, Xers were not that concerned about intellectual things. Xers were more pragmatic. Let's go do it, let's go make it happen. And since many churches have Xer senior ministers, they assume that millennials are like that too. That's a major shift, and it's something we can address immediately. And other people in the videos as well as the session have talked about it. Finally, this one will take a year. We got to get good with singles. We have to focus on singles. All right. Percentage of not yet married adults, 25 and older. In 1960, 9% of people weren't married yet, 25 and older. Today it is 20%. That's doubled. Now, Robert Withrow, kind of the rock star, one of the rock stars of religious research. He said it this way: nearly all the drop in attendance by Xers and millennials compared to when the boomers were emerging adults is explained by the fact that, you ready? Married millennials come to church as much as boomers did in their 20s. Married millennials today come to church as much as boomers did in their 20s. Single Xers and millennials, singles don't. Single Xers and millennials don't come to church. Most of the difference between church attendance today and church attendance in the past is explained by singles. He goes on to point out that today the typical church attender is married with kids and the typical non-attender is single without kids. We do better, just like businesses do better, when people have babies. I remember hearing Lyle Schaller, the dean of church sociologists, answer the question once, what do we do to get young people to stay in church? He said, help them have kids. Nothing anchors you down like babies. You show up regularly, you're going to be there anyway. You help out in the nursery, right? You buy a house. We've just not spent a lot of time figuring out singles because they're hard. They seem less stable. But if we're going to reach millennials, we have to reach singles. And so I would suggest the next year you begin to experiment and work with singles and put a higher priority on it than we have in the past.
Well, thanks, Hayden. Hayden, very challenging and insightful insights into this millennial generation. We're going to continue on. This is actually one of the videos you'll see during this year's Nine. We're going to give you a little preview of it. It's from Pastor Craig Groeschel at life.church. They just changed their name from lifechurch.tv to life.church. Craig's been a great friend at Leadership Network and has actually done a video for us, I believe, just about every year. 6 years that we've been doing the Nine, so we're very thankful for his friendship. Craig's going to be very honest here, and I think this is, and the reason I want to show you this on the preview is that Craig readily admits, hey, I don't have this all figured out. We're still working through this. But he shares with you some things that he's looking at in particular, some things that they're learning there at life.church, and really kind of lays out what some of his steps are right now, even as he's in this learning process. I think it'll be really valuable for you, so watch this from Craig Groeschel.
Hey everybody at the Nines, I'm Craig Groeschel, the pastor of Life Church, and I'm excited to talk to you for a few minutes about how do we engage millennials, how do we keep them in the church, how do we reach those who are not in the church, how do we reach them with the message of Jesus. First of all, I'm not an expert at all. And so what I've been doing is I've been meeting with our younger staff members and asking questions. A couple times a year, I bring in a group of 20-somethings and I ask them, what am I doing that gains credibility with the emerging generation? What am I doing that loses credibility? What messages did you like? What is our church doing that's engaging them well? What are we doing that is losing credibility with that generation? And this has really helped me learn a lot. If you're not doing those types of meetings, I would encourage you to do so. The next type of meeting that I'm going to do, which I haven't done, is not just talk to our church people, but go and talk to 20-somethings that are not engaged in church and ask them similar questions. What would interest you if you were going to go to a church? What type of church would you go to? What kind of questions are you asking? What kind of spiritual assumptions do you have? And so on. So first of all, we have to make sure that we don't assume we know the answers, but let's really be involved and ask questions. So what have I learned in asking questions? Several things. First of all, music really matters. It matters more than we can imagine. If someone my age loves the music, chances are someone who's 21 isn't going to love the music, and we have to be willing to change the style of worship and the music. That matters a lot. I also know that authenticity matters. If we're working hard to be slick and professional and produced, of course we want to be excellent, but more than being slick, professional, and produced, we need to be real, we need to be transparent, we need to be vulnerable. We can't present truth as if it's always, oh, this is just boom, this is clean. We have to allow for some of the complexities in life. That doesn't mean that we compromise on truth, but we allow tensions to arise, and we talk about how we struggle, and we have to be vulnerable, we have to be authentic. The way people are going to be involved in the church is changing. What used to be is that weekend attendance would drive involvement. That's not the case anymore. Now, involvement is going to drive weekend attendance. And so we cannot assume that a 23-year-old is waking up going, what church should I go to? Most of them aren't. What we need to do is not wait for them to come to church, but take the message of the church to them. We have to be involved in relationships. We have to find a way to take community to them, to enter into their community, to really do life together. And we may have to engage people outside the church before they ever consider becoming a part of the church. Another thing we have to do is have to make sure that we're answering the right questions. Here's a theory I have. Oftentimes, we as church leaders, we're trying to answer questions that they're not asking. We need to make sure that we're answering the right questions, and therefore we have to find out what kind of questions are they asking. If we're saying, here's the answers to things that nobody's asking, then we're going to lose a generation if we're not careful. Another big thought is Jesus came full of grace and truth. He came full of grace and truth. For years, the church kind of would lead with truth. Here's the truth. The Bible says it. I believe it, and that settles it. Oh yeah, we have grace. If we lead with truth, then chances are we're not going to reach the next generation. We have to lead with grace. It doesn't mean we ever compromise on truth, but we lead with grace. We have to be willing to accept people that behave much differently, believe much differently than we do. We need to give them permission to belong before they believe like we do. We're going to lead with grace while not compromising truth. And finally, no matter what, we need to trust the power of the gospel. It doesn't matter what age somebody is, what their belief system is, what their worldview is. All of us recognize that sin destroys, sin separates us from God. Everybody has within them a longing and some sense of eternity. No matter what they believe, Jesus does transform lives. We continue to preach that the tomb is empty, Christ is risen, and as long as we care about people and preach the gospel with integrity, we believe that Jesus will build his church.
Well, thanks, Craig. Very encouraging. And again, I don't think anybody really has all of our strategies and what works figured out in this area of engaging millennials. But it's so great to kind of hear the direction that they're taking there at Life.Church and some of the things that they're looking at. Again, the NINES is happening this November 10th and 11th. It's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. It's going to be 4 hours each day from noon until 4 p.m. And also a special evening session on Tuesday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern and 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific. We'll tell you a little bit more about that a little bit later on in today's preview, but you'll want to mark your calendars again, Tuesday and Wednesday, November 10th and 11th, and on Tuesday evening at 7, from 7 to 9 p.m., and that's an event for your entire church. You'll want to mark that on your calendars. If you haven't registered you and your team, we would appreciate you doing that. You can do that right here at the website at thenines.tv. We would just like to have a record of who's got a plan to be with us on that day. It's totally free to join us that day. All you need is a computer and a little bit of time to sit and kind of soak in this great content. We're going to move on from the millennials to what we call the religious nuns. And it's really interesting. The newest Pew study that just came out said, when you ask people what their religion is or what their denomination is or whatever, a lot of people now are, and we've heard a lot about it, are just checking nothing in particular. So, what is it? As a matter of fact, it's been up from 16 to 23% in the last 7 years. I mean, that's a dramatic increase. So how will the church engage people that seemingly have no interest whatsoever in the church or any really religious affiliation? Well, we're going to hear again from our day that we had recently with Leadership Network in Seattle. We're going to hear from Drew Dick. Drew Dick is the managing editor at Leadership Journal, and he's also written a book called Generation X Christians, Why Young Adults Are Leaving the Faith and How to Bring Them Back. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the religious nuns. Okay, and again, these aren't Catholic nuns. These are the people that say, look, I don't really have any affiliation with any religious organization. Listen to Drew's insights. I think you'll enjoy them.
When I was, 21, I guess, I was a youth pastor. And the awesome thing about being in ministry at 21 is that you know everything about ministry. At least I thought I did. Anyway, overall it was a pretty good experience. I did it for a couple of years, and of course, as any of you know who've been in youth ministry, it's tough. Kids' attention spans are short, and it's high energy, and I did my best at giving the kids a good time and then trying to give them little devotionals here and there. But really, my worst day as a youth pastor came about 10 years after I quit. Let me explain. It was when I decided to go on to social media and track down some of my former youth group members. So there I was, I don't know, I think it was Facebook. So thanks to the magic of social media, I'm perusing the lives of these young adults that I'd once corralled into a gym on a Friday night. And I remember the first one I looked up, it was a young woman who had been very prominent in the youth group, kind of the pillar of the youth group. She was on the worship team, just had this ardent love for Jesus. And I looked at her Facebook profile, and I don't want to be a legalistic Larry, but what I saw didn't exactly encourage me. It looked like an advertisement for Girls Gone Wild, okay? I sent her a message, asked her how her life was doing, and somewhere in there I slipped in, "Are you still into Jesus?" And her response said it all. I didn't get one. The next guy I looked up was this young, he was like in junior high at the time. We had junior high and high school in my youth group. And I thought, man, if there's one kid who's on the straight and narrow, it's going to be this guy, because I remember he was really smart. He would read C.S. Lewis over the summer, and not like the Narnian ones either, like the deep stuff. So I thought, if there's one guy that's on the straight and narrow, it's him. Well, he was on the straight and narrow. It was just a very different kind of straight and narrow. Under his favorite books, The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, his religious views were anything that stands up to scientific scrutiny. It was really disheartening, to say the least. It was tragic. And then, that was kind of my first experience with this topic. And then as I started to do some research, read the literature on this next generation, what I found out was that, as many of you have, my experience wasn't all that unique, but was in fact reflective of a much larger trend that we're seeing with the millennial generation. Depending on which research firm you read, whether it's Barna or Lifeway or Rayner Research, anywhere from 50 to 70% of young people that are raised in the church will disengage from the church by their 30th birthday. You've probably seen the stories, right, about the dramatic rise of the nuns. I think we're at 22% of the American population now claims no religious belief whatsoever. But what got my attention is the subset of 18 to 29-year-olds. And that's where it has gone crazy. In 1990, 11% of 18 to 29-year-olds claimed no religion. Today, that's at 34, 36%, depending which study you read. I think Pew has them at 34%. So that's crazy. And yet, I think it's a mistake. I've seen a lot of secularists, atheists kind of be triumphalistic about this and say, ha-ha, look, we're winning. And yet, if you look at the beliefs of the nuns, they are, for instance, more likely than the general population to believe in Bigfoot, in UFOs, in reincarnation. So it's not that they're all these hardened atheist, materialist kind of people. They're very spiritual, and we know the cliche, spiritual but not religious, and that very much describes people in this group. Nominalism is dying. Because a generation ago, it was advantageous, maybe, culturally, to identify as a Christian. It's just what good people did. And they went to church, and they had that sort of identification, and they may or may not have been authentic followers of Jesus at all. And now I think what we're seeing is the death of nominalism. More and more people that were name-only Christians are now sliding into that nun category. And they're claiming no religious belief whatsoever. And that's kind of a bad news, good news thing, I think, because in a sense, the nominal Christians were the church's warm market, right? These are people that don't have huge obstacles to faith. And yet, in a way, nominalism is the worst kind of spiritual delusion, right? You think you're a follower of Jesus because your grandma was Baptist, or you just want to identify that way. So, in a way, I think it's maybe good because people are coming to realize where they really stand when it comes to the faith and the church. when I was doing research for a book on, I called them ex-Christians because that's the way they identified. I did these in-depth interviews with them, and it was incredible how forthcoming, how willing people were to talk to me about their experience. And it was about halfway through doing the interviews, my wife said, hey, you should ask this question. Do you ever still pray? And I told my wife, you don't understand, honey, that's not a good question. Some of these people are atheists, they're agnostic, they're angry about their experience of the church. That's going to sound silly, and they're just going to say no. But I went ahead and I asked it anyway, and you know what? Almost to a person, they said, yeah, I do. And I said, what do those prayers sound like? And then that's when they spilled forth these honest, angry, beautiful prayers. God, where are you? What happened? Do you still care about me? And it taught me a couple of things. It taught me to hear skepticism a little differently. I think sometimes we hear skepticism as an implicit threat to our faith. I know I do. But really, after these conversations, I learned to hear it differently, not as a threat to my faith, but as the broken language of spiritual longing, because that's what I think it is. And two, it taught me that God is still at work, even in those people who seem furthest from him.
Well, thanks, Drew. Drew Dick from Christianity Today. One of our favorite speakers at the Nines, every year, Perry has done a video for us. Perry Noble from New Spring Church in Anderson, South Carolina, has, for the last 6 years, been a friend of Leadership Network and also just blessed us with his insight in each year for the Nines, and this year's no exception. I wanted to give you just this really short word of encouragement. You listen to the press, even the religious press, many times when we talk about the religious nuns and those that just don't want to have anything to do with us anymore, seemingly, or those that really say that we don't really have any religious affiliation. A lot of the media just says this is a doom and gloom time for the church. I mean, I've read headlines about how Christianity is dying or Christianity is dead and how we're a post-Christian nation and all that. Listen to what Perry has to say. He has a little bit different take for you on the religious nuns.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nines, which isn't really the Nines, it's the Fives, but let's not get into semantics. I've been asked to kind of speak to the rise of the nuns. Now, the first time I heard the phrase rise of the nuns, I thought about angry Catholic women with machine guns storming the Vatican, but that's not actually what the rise of the nuns are. The rise of the nuns have to do with people that were born after 1998, which is awesome because they didn't have to listen to Vanilla Ice, and how they're associating, when it comes to filling out a form and on religion, they just check none. And it seems like that the church world has lost its mind when it comes to this group of people. But I see it a couple things differently. Number one, the days of cultural Christianity in America are coming to an end. And I think that's good because I've been in church work now for over 25 years, and I've discovered that a lot of people that are in church aren't necessarily in Christ. And so the day of the businessman going to church just to make a business deal is over, which I don't think makes our religion weaker. I think it actually makes it stronger, which leads to number two. People seem to be concerned over the large number of people that are saying they're not affiliated with any religion. I call this a mission field. I call it an opportunity. I think we have the greatest opportunity in the world to reach people far from God, and people are raising their hands and asking, how do we do this? How do we reach the nuns? And I think I've got it. We preach about Jesus. We preach about the gospel, and we preach about it in a way they can understand it. It's going to take less prayer meetings and more preparing our hearts to actually engage them in a way that they can understand the message that we are proclaiming. So I'm not against prayer, but I'm way more passionate about preparing our hearts and minds to enter the conversation with people that say, I have no religion. Because the people that are saying, I have no no religion are actually asking for something to believe in. And as the church, we have the gospel, the message of Jesus Christ. We should not be worried about the rise of the nuns. We should embrace it, thank God for it, and step into it because it's one of the greatest opportunities we've ever been given as a church. Love you guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Perry. I tend to agree with Perry. Man, there is so much opportunity to reach and engage people that don't believe all the hype that you read. Christianity is alive and well, and part of what we want to do with the Nines this year is to encourage you to engage. You know, many churches are going to have to do some kind of a pivot or a turn here in order to stay in a place where they can really engage millennials in the next generation. So that's what we're learning about. That's what we're talking about on this year's Nines. We're going to talk a little bit about the religious duns, a little bit different than the nuns, but we're going to hear from a sociologist, Josh Packard, here in just a moment. But I wanted to remind you, again, the dates for this year's Nines are Tuesday and Wednesday, November 10th and 11th from noon to 4 p.m. And then we're doing something really, really special, something brand new this year for the Nines. It's on Tuesday evening, and it's going to be a session from 7 to 9 p.m. That's 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern or 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific, according to where you're watching. This is going to be really something very cool, I think, for you and your entire church body or whoever you would like to invite from your church. You know, normally the Nines is kind of a leadership event for staff and for your high-level church leaders and leadership team. But this Tuesday evening session is going to be for your entire church. Here's what we're finding as we talk to pastors. A lot of pastors, most churches actually, that are really interested in reaching people are having these conversations. How do we reach, how do we engage millennials? How do we engage those increasing numbers in our communities that say, I don't really have any religious affiliation? How do we reach the people that say, I'm done with the church. I've been there, done that, and I'm not going back? And how do we reach the next generation, the Generation Z, those that are the children of millennials? That's a totally different generation than the millennials, and we have to reach them and engage them differently than we did their parents. So a lot of church leaders and leadership teams and church staffs are having that conversation. How do we need to pivot? How do we need to change to reach these people? But not a whole lot of churches as a whole are having these conversations. So what we want to give you the opportunity to do, and sometimes this is beneficial, to have somebody outside come in and kind of start the conversation. And that's what we want to do on that Tuesday evening from 7 to 9. It's going to be a very special time of sharing some of the content from the Nines, not just for church leaders, but for your entire church, your entire congregation. And we're just going to raise the questions about how do we need to change? And we're not going to give you any answers. What we're going to do is we're going to open with about 45 minutes of presentation about why it's important that churches really get on the bandwagon to determine their vision on how they're going to engage these groups. And then we're going to break it up, and we're going to allow you to get around tables or around circles and to discuss those things through some discussion items that we'll give you, some facilitated discussions on what that means for your church. So you can start to take it from the staff level and the leadership level on down to the laity so that they can start having those conversations and get excited and pumped about what needs to happen to reach these age groups. Again, that's going to be Tuesday evening. We invite you to invite your entire church. It's totally free on that Tuesday evening. It's going to be at 7 o'clock, both Eastern and Pacific time. It'll last for about 2 hours. A great opportunity for you and your church to talk and really dive into these issues. Well, I promised you that we're going to hear from Professor Josh Packard. He's going to talk to us a little bit, give some research. And this is really, again, it's not doom and gloom. This is encouraging research that Josh brings us about the religious duns. Now, these are people that maybe that were a part of your church maybe 5 years ago, maybe a year ago, but they're not there anymore. And it's not that they don't love Jesus, it's that they're not in love with the church, the way the church is right now. They're the religious duns. They say, I'm done with church. Josh is going to come share. It's challenging. It's encouraging. Josh is the professor of sociology at the University of Northern Colorado, and he again came to share with us in Seattle at our one day that we did on this topic. And I just want to turn it over to Josh. Josh, come share with us on the religious duns.
The duns are the people that are already Christian. You don't have to convince them of anything, right? They are on your team. Okay, they believe in God, they believe in Jesus. They're just not believers in the institution. There's 30 million duns in this country. 30 million. That's a lot. But what I want to argue to you today is that that number is irrelevant. Because as large as your churches are, even combined, you are not pastors to the country. Right? You are pastors to your church. So the number that matters is not 30 million. The number that matters is 6, if you know 6 people who have left your church but kept their faith. If you know 10, then the number that matters is 10. The other number that matters on a global scale is that there are 7.5 million people sitting in churches on a Sunday morning that told us on the survey, yes, I go to church, but I'm on my way out. What the duns have told us is that the reason we don't trust people is because we don't trust positions. We don't trust titles. We don't trust structures. It's not the people that occupy them. It's the structures that they're in. It is not for the duns that the nature of authority has shifted or changed in any way. They're totally fine with pastors telling them what to do. They're totally fine with the idea of a judgmental God. Some of them are. I mean, they all have different theologies. But they're not leaving because they're tired of being told what to do by the church or by a pastor. They're totally okay with that. It's not that the nature of authority has changed, but the locus of authority has shifted. I don't think this is a generational issue. We can track the decline of distrust back to Watergate, and then it's declined steadily across all institutions from that point forward, for all generations. I'll use my dad as an example. He grew up Catholic. And when I was doing this research, I was trying to process some of the data, and I was like, Dad, it's really weird. Where are these people? Where on earth where do they get off just trying to listen to whoever they want to listen to without actually listening to their pastors and their preachers? So I asked my dad, I'm like, Dad, if your priest told you to do something, would you do it? He goes, well, it depends on what it is. I'm like, but you're Catholic. That's the thing. If the Pope, that's the whole deal. And he said, well, when I was a kid, I would have. I said, what about now? And he goes, I don't know, give me an example. I said, well, if your priest said, God wants you to do things in this world, you need to take better care of your body so that you're in better health. I said, he's from Texas. I said, would you stop eating Bluebell, the ice cream? And he's like, oh, no. I mean, he did now because, it kills people. But just not in the way that they thought. I said, well, then who could get you to stop eating ice cream? And he's like, oh, you could. You could, my wife could. There may be a couple of friends who could. And it was in that moment, it was in that conversation that I realized what the duns have been telling us over and over and over again, that the locus, it does not matter. Your title does not matter. Right? Your position in your organization does not matter. In fact, it is a hindrance, not a help. Right? That what they kept telling us was that it's the relationship that matters. If I don't have a relationship with you, I'm not going to listen to anything you say. At all. Once we have a relationship, I'll listen to everything you say. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it all, but I'll listen to all of it. Because I know that you care about me. See, here's what happened in this country. If people are wondering about sort of the relationship between technology and the way that cultures have shifted, they've shifted for everybody, not just millennials, right? Not just nuns, not just duns, they've shifted for everybody. And what early, that's crazy for me to say because I'm only 37. It wasn't until very recently that the church did not have a monopoly on organizing people in their communities. Think about that for a second. If you wanted to know what was going on in your community, you had basically 3 options: your work, your school or your kid's school, and your church. And that was it. The church never had to worry about getting people together. There were some Rotary clubs and those kinds of things, but they weren't necessarily present in all places or even relevant in all places. okay? Churches became the de facto place where people got together to live life. And what that allowed the church to do then was stop focusing on belonging and start focusing on belief. And somewhere along the lines, they got this equation backwards and started thinking that belief comes first and belonging comes second. Sociology as a discipline is only 130 years old. We don't know very many things for sure. But we know that. We know that that equation is wrong. It's the very first sociological study that was ever done by Emile Durkheim in France. It's been confirmed throughout the years. We know that belonging comes first, and out of that, people believe together. But the overwhelming issue, they said, was not a people issue. Pastors are not bad people. They don't distrust church people necessarily, because these people, by and large, spent years in the church. They were, in fact, more committed. If you're sitting there thinking right now that the Duns are people who are sitting in the back rows and slipping out never to come back, that is not the case. The Duns are disproportionately involved in leadership. We talked to way too many pastors for this study who said that I wanted to do things in church. I wanted my church to be able to be a place where I could live out my life. And the bureaucratic structure of church kept stifling me and stifling me and stifling me. And then they realized one day, wait a minute, I can do this without them. The internet is a thing. And it exists, and it is a tool. And I can get together with people outside of my church to do the kingdom work that I think is important. As one of our respondents said, I'm not interested in doing the work of the church anymore. I'm not interested in doing church work anymore. I want to do the work of the church. What that means is they're not interested in contributing to the program set forth by a singular central vision by some guy, and it was always a guy, sitting at the top of this hierarchy, speaking down. Most of your churches are probably organized as bureaucracies, hierarchical, top-down. Everybody has a role, everybody has a position, and that's a really, really great structure for producing widgets. If what your church cares about doing, and this is not a judgment on my part, if what your church cares about doing is creating a phenomenal Sunday morning worship experience, for example, please do that in a bureaucracy. You're not going to find a better, more efficient way to create an amazing worship experience on a Sunday morning for hundreds or thousands of people than a bureaucracy. But there's probably some part of your organization that is not concerned about widgets, but is instead concerned about soul transformation. And if you're bringing the same organizational tools to bear on that part of your organization, you're doing yourself a disservice. Bureaucracies suck at soul transformation. Really, they suck at it. There's no way to measure it, which bureaucracies care about heavily. There's no way to decide that that's what somebody's job is and that's what somebody's job isn't. You can't fit that neatly into the year-end report. But if you care about this group of people, these really talented people who are walking out the door, what we suggest is there are some things that you can do around the margins of your organization that will help you. That will help you keep people engaged, and it will make your ministry, your overall ministry, more vibrant by engaging those who have already left. They're not going to come back to your church on Sunday mornings. They've told us that. And I have no reason to not believe them. I don't lie about my faith life. I don't think they're lying about theirs. But they will re-engage with the work that you're doing. You don't have to care about this group of people. Of all the people that are standing up here talking to you today, I'm the one who's least going to sell you. I have a good job. I don't need yours. I like mine. Right? This is not my thing. This is your thing. You care about these people? Fantastic. If you don't, though, let me make one promise. Is that you don't have to care about these people, but somebody will. Somebody's going to figure it out. Somebody's going to figure out what the Duns are doing, what they want, how they can be resourced. And that ministry, whatever it looks like, or those ministries more than likely probably, will be amazing. They will be incredibly, uncontrollably brilliant places of religious renovation in this country. The history of organized religion in the United States is a history of innovation. This is not state-supported religion like we have in Europe, where churches exist because they get tax dollars regardless of what they do. Right? The history of the church here is one of constant reinvention, constant reinvention, constant reinvention. The Duns are a canary in the coal mine. They're the first signal that change is coming. Change is coming in the way that we imagine what it means to be church and what it means to do church. There will be some of the existing structures that weather that storm and in fact lean into the wind and embrace that. And there will be a lot of them that will fall away. I'm not telling you that because I want that to happen. I'm saying that's what the last 200 years of religious entrepreneurship in this country tells us. Right? We're watching a bunch of institutions, brick and mortar churches right now, that didn't lean into the wind and the coming storms of a lot of what you all represent, which is to be more relevant and to be more accessible. They're now dying away as their membership gets old and can no longer sustain their buildings. But don't think that membership into the hundreds and into the thousands is somehow your birthright, that somehow you all have figured it out forever and forever and forever. Because those churches that are dying now, they thought at one time that they had figured it out forever and forever and forever. Change is constant, and it's coming in a big way. And it's coming because people are going to be doing the work of the church inside or outside the walls, whether you're going to help them do it or not.
Thanks, Josh. We've got one more group that we're going to talk about, and this is an important group. We often talk about today's kids are tomorrow's leaders. We're going to talk about Generation Z, as it's called, the next generation, a lot of different names. I don't know that it really has an official name yet, but what we're looking at for our purposes on the Nines this year is the next generation being ages 0 to 17. Or you can look at it as the children or the kids of millennials. Now, this group grows up a lot differently than their parents, and to engage them is going to take a little different type of ministry. We're going to hear from one of the people that's going to be sharing on the Nines this year on this topic. We've asked college pastors and youth pastors and children's pastors to talk about this 0 to 17 age group and what they're seeing and the differences between their parents and them. Rebecca Bullard is going to come and share, and she's going to talk about what they're doing and what they've done specifically for millennials and the children of millennials. She's at Cross Point Church in Nashville, and she's going to share some of the things that are happening there in the great city of Nashville.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Bullard, and I'm the kids pastor here at Cross Point Church in Nashville, Tennessee. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about how strategically targeting the next generation can be the solution for church-wide growth. Here at Cross Point Nashville in October of 2014, we had a great problem. We were at max capacity in all of our AM services, which were at 9:30 and 11:30. These were our services that we would call traditional service times, where most of our guests would attend. So we knew we had to do something quick and strategic in order to accommodate all the new guests that we would see coming to church after the new year in January of 2015. So we got in a room and we thought, what could we do to strategically be prepared for this growth? Because we know in church, when you're 80% full, you're really 100% full because people feel like there's no room for them. So we decided as a staff that we were going to target the next generation and also millennials. The way that we did this is we started a 4:30 most family-friendly service targeted at the next generation. We branded it towards them. We also started a 6:30 after-party service, and that was targeted at our millennials. I want to focus for just a few minutes on our most family-friendly service at our 4:30 targeted towards the next generation. The first thing that we did is we needed to strategically move families to a non-traditional service time. We needed to cast the vision of the why and how that would make room for all the guests. So what we did is we started sharing the vision. All of our branding, all of our communications, social media-wise, on stage, face-to-face, had to do with how important it would be for our church-wide growth if families specifically would make the sacrifice and would take a risk to leave a time that's traditional at church, like the 9:30 or 11:30, and try out the 4:30 family-friendly service. We started targeting our core families and sharing with them the vision and the why. We didn't want to just share that it was for an event or for something fun that they would do every week. We really wanted them to buy in that if they did this, they were contributing to the overall church growth of Cross Point. It was really neat to see families who were very ingrained in coming in the morning. They had habits of coming in the morning. One family was Ashley and Mandy, and they came every single week at the 11:30. We asked them specifically, would you come and try the most family-friendly service at Crosspoint? At first, they were hesitant because they didn't really know how they would make that fit into their Sunday. We had many different things to offer their family. We did a Crosspoint Kids Carnival before and after the 4:30 service. We did a cereal bar, which kids loved because there was lots of cereals that their family wouldn't normally buy. We did bounce houses. We did rock walls. We did Western nights. We did petting zoo. We did all these different things week after week after week. I called Mandy and Ashley after the new year and I asked them how it was going with their switch to the 4:30 family-friendly service. They said, Rebecca, originally we came because you asked us and because we knew there'd be fun things. But what we didn't realize was that this would give us an opportunity to really be able to connect. You created an experience where before and after every service, we got to connect with other families. And from that connection time, we have built new, long-lasting friendships. So not only did this help open up space in the morning service, it also allowed this family to connect more in community. It actually helped two parts of our church as a whole. That's just one story of how we created experiences and environments to add value to families in the way that excites them. And then what's neat about this is our morning services have grown and our 4:30 service has doubled in our kids ministry number. So we went from running one number back in 2014 to now we are seeing double that amount of kids coming this fall. It's incredible to see how something strategic as this has not only allowed our kids ministry to grow, but it has allowed our church as a whole to grow and has really showed families how important they are to Crosspoint, but most of all, how important the next generation is to God.
Thanks, Rebecca, for sharing what's going on there at Crosspoint in Nashville. Again, the topic for this year's Nines is engaging millennials, nuns, and the next generation. And as we at Leadership Network talk with churches all across the country, we really think that we're kind of tapping into something that's a huge, huge issue and a huge concern for many pastors and many churches all across the country. So much so that we're starting a new Leadership Network Hub program this fall, specifically for churches that are interested in working out how they're going to engage millennials, nuns, and the next generation. And one of my colleagues, Brent Dolfo, is going to be the director for this hub experience, and I've invited him to come and share just a little bit about what this hub experience looks like.
Hi, my name is Brent Dolfo. I'm part of the team here at Leadership Network. For the last 10 years, I've had the privilege of working in Europe with LN, as well as everything we do with leadership development. One of the things I love being part of the team at Leadership Network is the chance to explore what's next for the church. What are the new challenges and new opportunities for the church? In a recent survey of the Leadership Network churches, 2 out of 3 said they were very concerned about engaging the millennials, nuns, and the next generation. Lots of excellent research has been done both by Christian organizations and major Fortune 500 companies on the needs, the wants, the mindsets of these groups in this post-Christian culture that we find ourselves in. Do you realize millennials now exceed baby boomers as the largest segment of the U.S. workforce? In the last U.S. Census, we saw the percentage of society that identified themselves as no religious affiliation, known as the nuns, grew from 6 to 20%. These new realities begin to impact everything in our church ministry, from our models of evangelism, how we do spiritual formation, our messaging, our architecture, our space design. Some early new models of engaging millennials, nuns, and the next generation are emerging in various locations and contexts within the church. But churches are seeking to understand the type of leadership necessary to engage these groups, as well as churches are looking for practical models and solutions to use in their ministry. Leadership Network is pleased to be offering a new hub topic to help churches and church leaders. Through connecting with innovative teams and exposure to breakthrough ideas, Hub is where you can get new ideas to implement to make impact. New generations and new mindset mean new challenges and new approaches for the church. Are you ready to engage in helping to reshape your ministries to impact your community? Are you ready to take on the challenge of reshaping for the millennials, the nuns, and the next generation? If you are, check out our website for more information.
I'm a millennial, and I endorse this message.
Well, thanks, Brent. Brent Dolfo, who is the director of our new Hub program that will be beginning this fall at Leadership Network, specifically around this topic of the Nines this year on engaging millennials, nuns, and the next generation. Grab a pen and pencil. Pen and paper. There we go. Pen and pencil really wouldn't do you much good, would it? I want to give you Brent Dolfo's email address. If you're interested at all in being a part of this Leadership Network Hub experience on millennials, nuns, and the next generation, I want you to just simply write Brent an email and say, hey, Brent, I saw this on the Nines preview, and I'm interested. We really think this group's going to fill up very quickly, maybe even before the Nines starts. So if you are interested at all, write this down. It's Brent, B-R-E-N-T, dot, period, Dolfo, D-O-L-F-O, Brent.Dolfo at leadnet.org. Just tell him that you saw Todd talking and blathering on about how great the Leadership Network Hub experience for millennials, nuns, and the next generation is going to be, and he will get you all the information you need on that. All right, as we close out, just want to give you one more kind of overall big picture of what we're looking at for the Nines this year. It's going to be 2 jam-packed, unbelievable days. And we say that every year, but it really is. On November 10th and 11th, that's November 10th and 11th. It's a Tuesday and a Wednesday each day, primarily for you and your leadership team and your staff from noon until 4 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so noon to 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday and Wednesday, November 10th and 11th. And then a very special session for not just you and your staff, but your entire congregation. We hope that you'll put an announcement in your bulletin, put it on your website, invite people out to watch. That's on Tuesday evening on the same theme, same topic. It's at 7 to 9 p.m. And again, it's totally free, but we will provide you with some facilitated discussion opportunities for you and your church family around this theme of engaging millennials, nuns, and the next generation. If you have not registered yet, you can do so right here at this website, thenines.tv. It's totally free to watch on that Tuesday and Wednesday, absolutely free. All you need is a computer. But we do want to know if you're going to be joining us, just so we know who's going to be there. And can I encourage you, watch this, don't watch this alone. Watch this with at least one other team member. Watch it with your leadership team. Watch it with your staff. We have a lot of churches that gather 40 and 50 people, their entire staff together to watch the Nines every year. We would encourage you to do that because, and here's why, you will take so much more away from the Nines if you watch in a group than if you watch individually. The discussion and just the dialogue that the Nines this year, I'm sure, will encourage you to have is going to be well worth the price of admission, which is free, right? No, but it's going to be really, really great. Make sure you mark your calendars. All of our schedules get so busy and jam-packed with things. I encourage you, take out your phone, take out your computer, put that on your calendar so that you can remember November 10th and 11th. We would like to thank all of our donors, all of our sponsors. Our sponsors this year include Lightcast Media. They include Vanderbloemen Search Group and Compassion International. We could not do it without them. And again, join us here, right here at this website, thenines.tv, November 10th and 11th for the 2015 edition of the Nines.